Weeknight. If you're Will's age, go to class. If you're Edie's age, it's time for class. Brian Beck got good news today. I guess that's all we know for now. And class tonight, Revelation. We finished chapter 7 last week, but we're going to go back and cover some things that I studied and found answers to. So let's start tonight and look back on chapter 7 before we get into your homework. We had the list of 12 sons, 12 tribes, and then the list of 12 tribes in Revelation is different from the list of the 12 tribes of Jacob. In Revelation, it leaves out Dan and Ephraim. And our question was, why? It adds back Joseph and Levi. So, did anybody do any study and figure out why? It goes back to Judges chapter 17. 17, 18, 19 talks about the Ephraimites and the Danites, how Dan didn't kill off the people who he was, of the promised land that he was assigned. He took up idol worship, and then he moved out of his land into the land of Ephraim, which God didn't like that either. And if you go back and you look at that, they make some kind of promises that they're not going to give the Danites any sons or daughters to marry, and they're killed. Most of them are killed off, and then they finally get the tribe of Judah to give them wives, so the tribe of Dan will not be extinguished. Okay, and it's not a pretty sight in chapter 17 through 20, but this is kind of the pattern maybe John wants us to see in Revelation, that those tribes were not, those two tribes were not obedient. And look what happened to those two tribes anyway. It's a pattern for things to come. Is there a pattern to exist prior to the Lord's return to rule over Israel? By excluding these two tribes in the list in Revelation, the Lord's pointing our attention back to circumstances at the end of Judges. Final chapters of Judges and the story of Ruth, which follows, form a type of three-part story of the king's arrival to address the nation's idolatry. Part 1 and 2 is found in Judges 17 through 21. They chronicle the growing apostasy of Israel under the influence of the Danites and Ephraimites. Part 3 of the story is found in Ruth, where the Messiah's arrival in Bethlehem, pictured by the arrival of Naomi's son in Bethlehem, serves as the hope of Israel. These events picture a greater arrival of Christ to rescue Israel from apostasy. An apostasy is the giving up of one's religion. They gave up the religion of Judaism, and they went into idolatry. Okay. All right, and so we kind of have the same picture here, like Rome and the peoples surrounding the 7 churches of Asia Minor. Once again, the Lord will bring Israel a king from Bethlehem to rescue Israel from its apostasy, and that's Jesus Christ. And by excluding these two tribes, the Lord is emphasizing that the third part of the story is right around the corner. And that third part of the story, I guess, let's kind of go back and talk about our homework now. Anybody do the homework? You're excused, Vanessa. You weren't here last week. You didn't know about homework. I see the look on your face. All right. Homework was to find out what is the Great Tribulation. Did anybody even look it up? See what it might, Joey? Sitting there full of questions, I can tell already. What is the Great Tribulation? What do you think, Joey?
Confused about the 10 days. 10 days, and then it goes back to the
10 is earthly completion.
right, and then 1335 days. And I don't know, I just got confused. I pulled out the quotes. I was trying to look to find. I just couldn't get it together.
There's several places in the Bible that says that we're all going to endure tribulation. But nowhere is it more revelation-like than Jesus' own words in Matthew chapter 24. Matthew 24 even references back to Daniel, Joey. And in Daniel, there's 3 different places that talk about tribulation. And we'll get to those in a minute in Daniel. But I thought we'd look at Matthew 24 first. And as we go through Matthew 24 talking about tribulation, this is the chapter where Jesus tells his apostles about the end times, what it's going to be like at the end of time. And he's going to talk about 3 different tribulations in Matthew 24. So I kind of think we've got to go over Matthew 24 to talk about it. But as we do, look and see where you see Revelation and the things we've talked about, the Roman Empire and the emperor worship. Is it big enough to see up there? Jesus, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray. For many are going to come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, and see that you're not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famine and earthquakes in various places, but all these are the beginning of birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation, and they'll put you to death, and you'll be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Many will fall away. Many will betray one another and hate one another. Many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will increase, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations. Then the end will come." So far, have you seen Revelation in what we've read so far? Some are going to be put to death. Many will worship the emperor. Others will betray their neighbor. They will tell on them. Ben over here, he's a Christian. We need to sacrifice him Sunday. But I remember how they were doing that in the dedication of the temple at Pergamum, and then in the new temple in Ephesus. Many will cause you to be arrested, imprisoned, used as sport with gladiators, soaked in oil, used as street lights, fed to wild animals. Things are going to happen during this tribulation. Many are going to fall away and betray one another and hate one another. Let's go on. So when you see the abomination of desolation is spoken of by the prophet of Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down and take what is in his house. Let the one who's in the field not return back to get his cloak. And last, for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days, pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Sabbath. We're going to check out the prophecy of Daniel in a minute, what it says about the abomination of desolation. Anybody got an idea what the abomination of desolation is before we get there? Well, so far, what these verses kind of lead us to believe is this sounds like the Roman-Jewish war of AD 70. Head for the hills. The Romans are coming, okay? The Romans were already there, and they had been in Jerusalem since like 30 BC. But the Jews rose up against them, and the Romans came back to destroy the temple, kill off a lot of Jews, fight, make war. Head for the hills, the Romans are coming. They're about to trample on the Jews for standing up against them. Hence, they're going to destroy the temple and not leave one stone unturned here. And that's what he tells his apostles maybe in the next set of scriptures here. Still Matthew 24, verse 21. For then there will be great tribulation. Here's our great tribulation, Joey. In Matthew, okay? And this is what Revelation says. There's the great tribulation there. That those who are under the throne, the 144,000, they're the survivors of the Great Tribulation, okay, in Revelation. And that's how we got here. What is the Great Tribulation? Where are these people from? Verse 21, for then there will be great tribulation, such has not been from the beginning of the world until now. No, never will be. And if those days had not been cut short, we'll talk about cut short here in a minute, no human being would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Then if anyone says to you, look, here's the Christ, or there he is, don't believe it. For false Christ and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. So what do we think the Great Tribulation is? Anybody yet? Got an idea? Good guess? Theory? Hypothesis? And what if those days hadn't been cut short? What does cut short mean? Where do we find the Antichrist in Revelation? Do we find him in Revelation? Clark? Find the Antichrist in John. You don't find him in Revelation. Antichrist is not even mentioned in Revelation. But we do have a villain in Revelation, and he is called the Beast. And the Beast gets his power from Satan, and in Revelation he's called the dragon. Okay? John 7, who's Antichrist? Anyone who does not believe that Jesus came in the flesh. And the Great Tribulation, I think, is the period of persecution of Christians during the time of the beast who gets his power from the dragon. And that would be Domitian. Cut short, only to suffer great tribulation for a short period of time, 1,260 days, or 42 months, or for a time, times, and half a time. Matthew 24, verse 25. See, I have told you ahead of time. So if anyone tells you he is out there in the wilderness, don't go out. Or here he is, or in the inner room, or don't believe it. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there will be the vultures. Jesus warns them ahead of time of the Great Tribulation. Verse 29, Matthew 24. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the heavens, the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call. They will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. And this tribulation sounds like it might be the end of time. We're told here the sign will be Jesus coming in the clouds. The end of Luke and the beginning of Acts say the same thing, that Jesus' apostles were standing there watching him go up into the clouds, being taken away from their presence when he ascended back up into heaven. And the angels that were standing there or appeared to them tell the apostles, why are you standing here? This Jesus that you see leaving will return just as he left in the clouds. So, Thessalonians tells us that we will be gathered up to meet him in the clouds. You have a lot of people that think 1,000 years Jesus is going to come back and reign on the earth. But so far, what we've read here, Jesus is not coming back to the earth. He's coming to get us in a cloud, and we will arise from this earth up to a cloud and go back with him to heaven. This tribulation sounds like the end of time. The angel trumpet call. Jesus is coming in the clouds. Matthew 24 gives us a glimpse of 3 periods of tribulation. First period is what the Jewish Christians suffered for changing from the Mosaic system. You know, they were hated by their fellow Jews because they believed that Jesus was the Messiah, even though Caiaphas had Jesus crucified. He led the chant, crucify him, crucify him, even when the Roman governors could find no fault with him. So the Jews, the Christian Jews, have already been persecuted once by their brothers in the Jewish worship. And the Sabbath sacrifice to Christian system, changing over to the Christian system of worshiping Jesus on the first day of the week, with Jesus as our sacrifice and not a lamb. We commemorate the death, burial, and the resurrection of Jesus around the Lord's table each Sunday. They were chastised, they were persecuted, they endured tribulation because they wanted to change the way Jews worshiped from the Mosaic law to Christian worship. Okay? The second period listed in Matthew 24 is talking about the Great Tribulation. And I believe that is where Satan, the dragon, gives the beast, Domitian, the power to inflict severe harm to Christians as seen in the temple to the emperor sacrifices in Asia Minor. They sacrificed Christians to their, not to their Greek gods, but to the emperors. Remember, we had a temple in Ephesus, and then we had a new one built in Pergamum, and they got into a battle over which one can sacrifice the most Christians on this day. And I think that's where Domitian had a big influence. He had a big influence here. And we also read that there will be great signs and wonders performed by this person that we believe is an Antichrist type person, even though he's not called an Antichrist in the book of Revelation. Domitian does not believe in Jesus. Okay, he inflicts severe harm. Great distress and fear was experienced by all Christians living during that time period. And then this third tribulation in verse 29 is a time period that maybe we're living in now. You know, we're undergoing tribulation too. We see our government trying to limit our religious freedoms. We see our government honoring homosexuality, penalizing preachers for even talking about it in church pulpits. Period 3 is any and all persecutions after the first century of the Great Tribulation. Right? Why do we know it's the Great Tribulation is there? Well, let's keep on reading. Matthew 24, verse 32. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. Jesus' words. As soon as the twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. What things? I think the Great Tribulation, okay? That generation is going to see Satan given power for, how long, Joey? You told me a while ago back there in the back, for 42 months, or times, and half a time, or 1,260 days, which is 3.5 years, okay? Jesus started his ministry back in AD 30, and he was crucified roughly AD 33. So I'd say Jesus got to teach for 3.5 years. Satan is going to get the same amount of time to ruin the church as Christ did to develop Christians. The numbers, figurative numbers, could be. I actually think, Diana, that the 3.5 years, that's what Jesus got. We know that he started in AD 30 and he was crucified 3 years later, you know. For then there will be great tribulation, such as not been from the beginning of the world until now. Those days had not been cut short, no human being would have been saved. I don't think so. I think that's talking about the period of time that Satan is going to give Domitian power to do whatever, you know. Well, I don't think that anyone else is going to be given the same amount of power that Jesus had on this earth. But because, kind of like when Satan talked to God about Job, you know, go down there and sift him, you know. But in this case, God has given Satan the same amount of time that he gave Jesus to set up the church. I think he's given Satan the same amount of time to destroy it. And then when this 3.5 years is up, I think that's when Satan's going to be thrown into the abyss for a period of time. Where'd I get? Yes, sir. I don't remember how long he ruled. Y'all got one of them tan sheets? I got one. Domitian reigned from 81 to 96. So he ruled a great while. So for 3.5 years in there somewhere, Satan gave him power to do whatever. Augustus was the emperor when Jesus was born. Tiberius was the emperor when Jesus died. And then you had... No, we can't say Domitian's reign was cut short. It's from 81 to 96. About 15 years. Titus. More questions, thoughts? Because I kind of thought, after I've studied this stuff this week, it's been more of, this is going to occupy class tonight instead of Revelation, because this is just talking about the Great Tribulation and when it is, when it was. And I'm not positive I've got it right, but this is what I believe the scriptures are saying here. That we all experience tribulation, but that this one is the big one where Satan and Domitian, the dragon and the beast, are really, really, really severely persecuting Christians. What do you think, Diane? Yes, but I don't think Satan was given the same amount of power that Jesus had, to such an extent that God would not stop him for 3.5 years. I hope that time never comes. But I personally don't think Satan's going to get the same amount of power Jesus had on the earth ever again. I think that we've got the Word of God to get us through everything, and Satan has got the word of mouth. Okay, I think he can send us all kinds of temptation, test, but I don't think he can send us or punish us through some type of miracle. I don't think Satan's going to have that type of power to change the sun, back up the shadows like... I'm saying that God gave Satan the power to give to whomever he wanted, and I'm thinking that Domitian spread it around just like Jesus gave the apostles the ability to perform miracles.
Got it.
Does that sound far-fetched? What you and I had trouble with the last time we talked about this, and maybe I still have trouble with it, is that we don't see in secular writings like Josephus. We don't see Josephus writing about a miracle that Domitian performed. Okay? Why? Just the other day, Domitian raised somebody from the dead. We don't see those things. But we have record of it in the Bible that Jesus did, that the apostles did. But there's no place that says, it just says, like what we just read here, that they will perform signs and wonders. Maybe they didn't write them down for a reason, so we can't, I don't know, maybe just like the witch of Endor. Is it possible for us to raise a spirit from the dead? She did, so if we want to go to the dark side, we could conjure up that kind of power too, but not going to try it. Now, has all this just completely baffled everyone? This is kind of stuff and discussion we don't discuss. And it's mainly because we don't understand it. This is like new to us because we don't go this deep. We don't sit around and talk Bible. And just think of the 7 churches there when they read John's letter, and they've got enough Bible knowledge to say, hey, that's in Daniel. Yeah, you're right about that, Joey. That one's in Daniel. And, I wish we sat around and talked about it a lot more than we do. Questions?
Back on Christ, we allow Satan to come and play.
We give him an easy end. And I think that is a minor tribulation compared to what the Christians endured toward the end of the first century. I think they had big time persecutions. You know, I don't know anybody that's been thrown into a ring and watched lions devour them for sport, or having to fight gladiators and watch a gladiator cut off somebody's arm for sport.
Verse 29, immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened. Is immediately is it referring to the next thing to happen, or what do we feel like immediately means there?
Diane, I struggled with that one a little bit too, and what I settled in my mind is that we're going, right now we're in the period of fractions in Revelations. Chapter 4, 5, 6, I don't know if 8's got any fractions in it or not, but everything's a third. A third of this is going to be swept away. A third of the sun's darkened. A third of the moon does not shine. A third of the stars were swept from the sky. Now, to me, a lot of that's figurative stuff, but when we get to chapters 16, starting in 16, we see the same thirds actually come into fruition. God's time, Jesus' time to reign will begin at the end of that 3.5-year time period. And he may scare them all to death, because it says his 2 witnesses that he sent to earth preached for 3.5 years, and they hated him, and they hung him on the wall, and they wouldn't bury him. And then when they took him down, God breathed life back into them and scared them all to death. You know? I don't know if you've read that far in Revelation or even know that story, but we'll get to it. And that one was big enough to scare everybody to death, especially if you were there and saw it. Somebody hang on the wall for, well, we know that Saul and Jonathan and some of their men were hung on the wall, and David sent his 30 mighty warriors to go get them off the wall and bury them, give them a proper burial. But in this case, they hang there for 3 days, 5 days. 5 days? I don't know. I'm not up on that one yet, but I know they hung there, and then Jesus, when they take them down, God breathes life back into them. And the people from all around the nations heard about it and feared the Christians. More questions? Good time to keep asking. Was that a...
No,
that was a real call? Okay. Okay, moving on.
I got it.
Well, whenever you get to studying this stuff, you'll be full of questions. 'Cause I don't think Sandy got mad at me, but I wasn't worth killing for about 3 or 4 days after that, with just reading this stuff and studying it. And, I found some more stuff I can't wait to get to here. Let's move on. Okay. I tell you the truth, this generation will not pass away until all these things have happened. Okay, so that's why I think the Great Tribulation was the last years of the first century. And I didn't make it to way more. All right, so Daniel. There's 3 places in Daniel that talks about tribulation. Daniel 9:27. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7. In the middle of that 7, he will put an end to the sacrifice and offering. Okay, no more blood offering. And at the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. Right? This is where Matthew started referring back to Daniel. And we looked at what Matthew was talking about. All right, let's go on, because there's 2 more places. Daniel 11:31. His armed forces will rise up to desecrate the temple fortress and will abolish the daily sacrifice. Then they will set up the abomination that causes desolation. What is the abomination that causes desolation? With flattery, he will corrupt those who have violated the covenant. but the people who know their God will firmly resist him. On the wing of the temple, he will put, what's he going to put? He's going to put something that causes, what is the abomination that causes desolation? It's idolatry. They will put a statue in the temple of God, okay? Will it be a statue of Domitian? Possibly. Titus? Maybe. Tiberius? Augustus Caesar? They were putting these statues of all these emperors in different temples, especially in Asia Minor, where these 7 churches were located. But then did they come to Jerusalem and put one in on God's holy hill? In 168 BC, Antiochus Epiphanes set up an altar to the pagan god Zeus, Olympus. Jesus predicts the same would be erected on the holy mountain, Matthew 24:15, and in Luke 21:20. The abomination that causes desolation would be set up in Jerusalem. But there's one more in Daniel. Daniel 12:11. From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there'll be 1,290 days. All right, and then back up in verse 6. One of them said to the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river, and this is the angel that's given Daniel this information, how long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled? The man clothed in linen who was above the waters lifted his right hand and his left toward heaven, and I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time, times, and half a time. And the thing that I thought so fascinating was this slide. When you look in the book of Revelation, all right, remember when Ben was here, one of the first things that he taught us was chiastic structure. Now, if you don't know what that is, it kind of starts here and it goes here, and then he replays it back here. And where we find these numbers, 42 months in Revelation 11:2, 1,260 days in 11:3, 3.5 days in chapter 11 of Revelation, verse 9, 3.5 days in Revelation 11, 1,260 days in chapter 12, verse 5, and then back to 42 months in Revelation 13:5. And when you look at chiastic structure, that right there is just fascinating. That just blows my mind that God writes like that. And I know John didn't have a clue what he was writing at the time. John didn't know what chiastic structure was, you know. All right, let me finish this slide here and then we'll go. Last night I was in awe when I found this on the internet. Ben taught us about these structures. I just never thought about these numbers being a chiasm before, and once you find these, it's like a miracle in itself. Remember, John didn't write or divide Revelation into chapters or verses. That wasn't done until 1227, and that was done by the Archbishop of Canterbury. It'd be over 100 years later before the Bible was actually printed. In 1382, Wycliffe printed the first English Bible and used chapters and verses. And to me, that right there is just fascinating. All right, next week we're going to start with the story of sevens, and that'll lead us back to Jericho. 7 angels, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls from the 7 seals. All right. Thank y'all for listening. Thank you for asking questions. Wish I could have answered them all.